The largest campaign ever to stop publishers destroying games.
Hi, I'm Ross,
Hi,
and I
Ross.
enjoy video games.
Me too.
Or a lot of them. I also enjoy owning things. You know, like things in my
Ross is in for a bad time. Ross enjoys owning things.
hand or my immediate vicinity that I use frequently. When I walk down the street, I like how people don't usually run up to me and try to take the clothes off my back, because it's
He
generally
doesn't live in San Francisco.
understood by society that those are mine and belong to me.
No.
But see, just by me saying those things,
Toronto?
we already have a problem.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can probably see where this is going.
Uh-oh.
The video game industry has a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I think regulators have no idea, actually. But there's one problem in particular I've been hating for decades.
What is
and
it?
it's getting worse and worse. And that is destroying video games so that no one can ever play them again. And I don't mean your brother sticking a disc in the microwave so that your copy is destroyed.
Ooh,
I
we
mean
did that in middle school.
everyone's. There's a really specific way this happens.
Did the AOL discs.
Just as a quick refresher, for most of gaming history, this hasn't been much of an issue. Most games contain the code that interfaces with the hardware and run the game, and that's the whole story.
Sure,
Now, for
yeah,
online
simple.
multiplayer games, it's a little different. Where a lot of the older ones will let players host the server that runs the game, then other people would connect to it. Or sometimes give you the software
And that's what
to
happens with a lot of older games, is that, like, you still have servers online, but they're not run by the company. They're, like, peer-to-peer.
make that server a standalone thing and connect to that. But over time, more and more companies decided, hey, instead of letting the player host the game, what if we did it instead? Well, there are pros and cons to that.
It's actually interesting he brings this up, because I looked recently, and it looked like there's a couple of Monster Hunter games that are actually ending their service as well, where you're no longer going to be able to play online with those. And this just happened, it got announced in the past couple of days. It's sad.
That can be a valid approach, in theory. But here's the problem.
Yeah.
The games industry has a horrible track record of maintaining its own games. There was a large study conducted last year that showed only 13% of published video games are still available by the publisher commercially. So what happens when the
Still available by the publisher commercially. Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with that. That's probably true. Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely.
publisher takes over the responsibility of running the game?
Because you think about every single Super Nintendo game that isn't on the Wii Shop or like the Nintendo Switch store. Yeah, it makes sense
well,
whenever you
it's
think about
usually
it.
pretty good while they support the game. Then when
Yeah.
they stop, it's a complete nightmare and has been responsible for destroying more video games than any other practice. That's a big shift. Because the industry is trying to get users to go from a model where they get to
Yeah.
keep their game, regardless of when support ends, to one where the game dies forever. I'm not a fan. For companies that do
Well,
this,
I think that a big problem for this too is that a lot of these games are online only. So like if you're playing this game and there aren't servers for this game, you effectively are no longer playing the game.
the number of games that survive in any form, forget being available commercially, is a lot worse than 13%. I
Yeah,
did an
true.
informal investigation on it a few years ago
Okay.
and found it was closer to 3%. I
Wow.
think that number may have gotten even lower since I did that. From my perspective, this has felt like a slow-moving coup to take away ownership from more and more people over time. So video games
I agree with that, but I also think that like a lot of the games that are being referenced that are no longer available are probably bad Atari games and bad Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis games too. That like these games are no longer being they're no longer being like provided. Like I think it's actually both. Like it's clearly there are issues like fundamentally, but why this percentage is so high is because there's a survivorship bias of the games that are like everybody knows well and like, oh yeah, we can't buy this game anymore. That's really bad. But there's like 50 other games probably that are out there that you can't buy and nobody cares because nobody wants to buy them.
publishers are making billions selling you a game as a good,
Yeah.
not telling you how long it will last, purposefully killing it later so you're left with nothing, but then they get to keep your money.
Well, I don't know if I agree entirely with this based off of the premise of every single game is off of this. So, For example, if you bought a Super Nintendo game in 1995 and you're playing it now, does the company have an obligation to continue selling that Super Nintendo game? Because whenever you're using that 87% metric, I think that includes those Super Nintendo games. So I think that this is really relevant in terms of like online games and games that are no longer functional without online server support and developer or publisher support. That's what I think this is really about primarily, because it's logically not about NES games that Nintendo isn't selling anymore, which I think are the vast majority.
Don't confuse this with rentals. Rentals are sold as a service and tell you exactly how long they last. A customer who rents something is informed. Video game publishers don't want that, because they know if they put on the box exactly how long the game will last, then that will hurt sales a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's important to withhold that information.
Like, for example, that's why I didn't play Season of Mastery. Season of Mastery, there's the first, like, a Classic Plus thing. That's why I didn't do it.
Customer. Because customers are used to video games lasting forever, more or less. You could have bought games from the 70s that still work today. You could have bought games from the 90s with online...
Well, those games aren't also being, like... I guess I'm probably being, like, kind of stupid about, like, hyper-focusing on the 87% thing. But, like, the developer isn't really publishing these either. And those are included in that metric.
Multiplayer that connect to the internet that still work today. Even if the companies that made them no longer exist. But a lot of publishers like to place modern video games that are designed to die, but they won't tell you when, right alongside ones that last forever. So they can try to cash in on customer...
Okay, so he is drawing the distinction. Okay. Yeah, all right. I understand now. Got it.
Confusion. Because the average person believes they are buying something. Now, I personally hate this practice because art has innate value to me. And while it's debatable if video games are art, they undeniably...
They're undeniably art. Anybody who thinks they aren't is probably like 65 and doesn't know how to use a smartphone.
Contain art. So seeing games destroyed to me is the same as if someone were to walk into an art museum and start torching the paintings.
Yeah, I remember that happened like at the beginning of like 2010s, right? With like ISIS taking over like different places and destroying the like different like statues and shit. I thought that was really sad. Whenever that happened, it was awful.
It's insult to injury that companies that do this face no penalties. Nor is there a good reason for them doing it. I won't get into the
I disagree with that. I think there is a good reason for it. The company no longer finds the game viable or worth hosting anymore because they're not making enough money off of it, so then they stop doing it to save money. Like, that's as good of a reason as any.
Details here, and you may hear...
It is anti-consumer, and it doesn't make it okay, but I think that there's a very obvious reason why. The problem is that a lot of these games don't have the option for dedicated servers that people can run on their own.
Excuses as to why companies have to destroy your games, even though they largely didn't used to do that, even for online multiplayer.
That's what we're talking about.
What I found is that the people saying that tend to either be uninformed or else incredibly unimaginative and can only see things one way.
When we order the pancakes, they're going to bring the maple syrup.
Maple syrup is supposed to be on the table before the pancakes. Of course, when they bring the maple syrup after the pancakes...
And he's right, because if you go to IHOP, it's on the table whenever you get there. Actually, I went to IHOP 2 years ago, and the place is like it's like a prison cafeteria now, because too many people would go to that one and get in fights, and so now there's like nothing on the table because people would throw things at each other.
Maybe too late.
Yeah, actually, I was
thinking about that. Too late, huh? Right?
Yeah, talking with people who defend this practice can feel a lot like that. I'm reminded of when Microsoft was sued by the Department of Justice for bundling Internet Explorer with Windows, and Microsoft claimed it was impossible to separate it from Windows 98, even though it wasn't even with Windows 95 when it launched. And through the power of hindsight, they actually did remove it from Windows years later.
This reminds me of like Shadowlands Covenants, remember that? Well, we can't just flip a switch and make it to where you can switch them whenever you want. Oh, everybody's leaving? Guys, we found the switch!
So it was possible earlier It's possible in the future,
Uh-huh.
but it's impossible right now because
Naturally.
the company has spent a lot of time trying to make it difficult. That is such a good analogy for what is happening with games. You have no idea. Anyway, no matter how you look at it, this is such an obvious assault on consumer rights. And in any other industry, a company destroying what they sold you would be illegal. If only there was something we could do about this.
This is an interesting question, because whenever you buy a game, are they destroying what they sold you? Because they sold you the game, and you're buying the game under the premise that it will be available to play, and you would never buy the game if it was not available to play with the servers, so you would logically have to know that they were providing the servers in order for you to buy it. You didn't buy the game? Well, you're buying the service. You're paying for the service indefinitely. Like I know that you never bought a game. You never bought a game. That's never how it worked. That's not how it worked in 1990. For example, like if you buy Super Mario Brothers 3 in 1990, you don't get to reproduce Super Mario Brothers 3 indefinitely for as many people as possible. So like that's never been the case. And it's also like, if we want to talk about legality, I'm sure that a lot of these companies are probably, they're probably safe legally. But this is something that's not good for users that want to play an old game that they can't play anymore because it has online functionality that is no longer available because the publisher decided that it wasn't worth the money.
Well, as it so happens, we have the best opportunity ever to take action on this.
How's that?
A few months ago, the company Ubisoft announced it was shutting
Ooh.
down a game of this nature called The Crew.
Yeah, I remember this.
Now, The Crew, I think, is a flawed but remarkable game, but none of that matters here.
It's okay.
What matters is it had at least 12 million players.
Wow.
So this affects a lot of people. And Ubisoft is headquartered in France. And
Okay.
France has some of the strongest consumer
What the hell
laws in
is
the
that?
world. See, this isn't really about The Crew or even Ubisoft. It's about trying to find a weak link in the industry so governments can examine this practice to stop publishers from destroying our games. Outside of the United States, this practice is very hazy legally. Many governments...
I think that what needs to happen is that publishers that are making games that are online only should have to provide, maybe not have to, right? But this is what I would want to see, is that the publisher would provide an opportunity for, if they're shutting down servers, for other people to maintain servers in their place. Because I don't think that a publisher has a indefinite responsibility to host servers for everything forever. Because if you gave them that responsibility, nobody would ever make a game online ever again. Because it would just be impossible to do that. Like, it would be like it's an indefinite financial commitment that you just can't do. So like it should be like, the goal should be to fight to have people who are able to make servers for themselves.
don't even have laws regarding this.
That's what I think.
I'm not kidding. More on that later. If we can find even one major country to penalize this practice, that might fix everything. Because the thing about letting you keep your game is it's not that expensive for companies to do it, especially if it's a known requirement from the beginning. Then it's almost negligible. So if
I also disagree. Like, if you have a game that has an online component, I think that the publisher should be able to take away the online component if they deem you as problematic. Like, for example, like if you're playing online and you're hacking, or you're playing online and you're screaming into every single lobby, then I think the publisher should be able to kick you out in the same way that if you buy a ticket to, you know, a concert and you're rowdy, they can kick you out. Or you go into a restaurant and you're loud, they kick you out. Like, there's no other instance where you can buy something and be in a public space that destroys other people's experience and like not have any repercussion for that. Like, it's very obvious that you should be able to. But the problem is whenever a publisher and like a developer is able to take away access to the game entirely. I can understand removing a person's access to their publicly hosted servers. I think that's fine. But removing access entirely is really bad.
company knows they have to let you keep your game in one country, they may as well make it global policy because then they've already done the work. It really could take just one victory to end this. So even if you have no interest in the crew, if you just want to keep your games, keep watching. There's more.
I see that. I see
Hearing about this shutdown has caused me to
precedent.
go on a research odyssey to see if I can find any possible way to get governments to examine the legality of destroying your games. I have been waiting for an opportunity like this. This problem has been going on for decades, but it usually only affects a small minority.
I'm assuming this is the start date and end of service date. Let me see if I can look and check it again. Yeah.
It's been going on for decades, but it usually only affects a small minority of players that are too dispersed to do much. Most have moved on when a game is killed, and the industry has been counting on that lethargy.
There's WildStar
So an
right
event
there.
like this that's big enough to do something is like the planets aligning. We have to take action on it. Now, I do not think I'm the ideal person to do this. I'm not a legal expert. I have limited reach. Honestly, everything about what I've been doing has been an amateur effort. I don't even want to be doing this. But if you care about this issue, I'm what you're stuck with because nobody else has stepped up. And I guess there is one thing that makes me a good candidate for this. And that, at least with me, you're getting maximum hustle. I have decades worth of resentment on this issue. You know when a dog is eating and somebody yanks away its food bowl?
like hiding
Even
onto it,
nice
yeah.
dogs will get angry or even attack you.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the industry on this.
He's the pit bull.
Since I started this campaign, I've spent hundreds of hours on it, talked to multiple lawyers, worked with over 100 volunteers, sent hundreds and hundreds of emails trying to chase down every single lead I can find. I have been relentless on this. I've felt it too. In the game trailer for Yes...
I don't think that you can hold the companies legally accountable for this because of the terms and services and like the condition agreements that you sign up for. So I don't think there's ever going to be a way that you can hold them accountable legally with what exists right now. I think what needs to happen is that there needs to be some sort of allowance for when a game publisher is no longer providing a commercial, like a commercial option to consume a game. The people who own the game should have the right to provide their own option. Because, like, yeah, if the game's making its own servers and you have to play on those servers, that's totally fine. EULA has no bearing on the law. TOS isn't binding, but at the same time, it's also like, it is and it's not. It's like you can sign away some degrees of your rights with TOS and EULA, but you can't sign away other degrees of your rights. Does that make sense?
Your Grace, the king is hearing so many requests from his subjects that at one point he just keels over from it all. Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. And after months of research, yes, I have found ways we can do something. Not just long shots either, but really viable routes. I have found what I think are all the agencies worldwide best equipped to take action on this issue. I've also found dead ends. A lot of dead ends. In fact, I found so many that if I had known earlier what I know now, I could have saved myself at least a month's worth of work.
Jesus Christ.
Like I said, this is an amateur effort, so I'm trying to make up for that with even more hustle.
Okay.
And because
What a
I'm treating
G.
this like it's my only shot, because it probably is, I'm not stopping at the crew. Remember, the crew is just a means to an end, which is to stop companies from destroying your games. So rather than just getting the government to interpret the law, I figure why not go to the source while we're at it? So in addition to the consumer action, we're also pursuing government petitions. Now hold on, I know what some of you are thinking. These are not normal petitions where you get a bunch of people to sign to show that people care and hope companies do the right thing.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, give me more credit than that. No, these are government initiatives where if we pass a certain threshold, the government has to respond. It's the law. And for some of them,
it's like
are
the 100K,
almost
I'm pretty
guaranteed
sure.
to be debated. Yeah, we'll see. But this is how a lot of
At
laws
least like
get
in
made.
the US.
So what's in these petitions? Well, it varies for every country since they all have different rules, but they all share
I
the
would
same
expect.
fundamentals. I tried to design the fairest proposals I could that still solved the problem. Yet remember that, naysayers, I'm trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think that's one component, is like, I think that this guy, even if people might disagree, because I've seen some people in chat that are like disagreeing with like what he's trying to do, this guy is trying to improve video games for everyone. He's not against you. Like, you shouldn't be against him at all. Like, this guy's really trying to do a good thing.
But I'm also trying to keep the scope as narrow as possible. I am not trying to reform the games industry. I am just...
Somebody says, too much of a double-edged sword to force companies to maintain something for a very small group of people. I don't think the companies should have to. And I think that's unfair. I don't think the companies should be held accountable for making a game available forever. But I also don't think the company should be able to shut down other people for making the game available after the fact that they're not making it available. Basically, like, if you're not providing it, somebody else can.
Trying to stop companies from destroying games that they've sold
That's my
to you.
perspective.
That's it. So, with that in mind, while the game is being supported, any game,
it's abandonware.
Absolutely
Yeah,
nothing
exactly.
would happen.
It's abandonware.
Companies could do whatever they wanted. We're going for a light touch. It's only once support ends that requirements would kick in. The first is any game sold or licensed, for those of you who want to be pedantic, will be required to be left in a functional state when support ends. This does not mean a 100% perfect state, but it means a hell of a lot better than completely inoperable.
I wonder what that means, a functional state. I really do, because, like, for example, like, let's say all the WoW servers shut down. Does that mean that you can, like, spin up your own server by yourself? Like an offline server that's available to the player? Because I think that you should be able to make your own server, but should that be available for, I don't know, like on a personal level or for the ability to join servers? I'm not really sure. It's something that's like kind of confusing to hear, but I do think that, yeah, I agree with it.
Also require no connection to the publisher or affiliated parties in order for it to continue functioning.
Require connection to the publisher. I 100% agree. Absolutely.
So it would need to be patched to either 100%. Be offline or have private hosting only.
Yes.
It's the only way.
Yes.
Anything less and the game dies.
That's right.
And yes, this would include DRM that needs to connect to the internet. And because
why would you need DRM? Like, let's think about this logically. If you're not selling the game anymore, then who cares if somebody steals it?
Being forced to go to all this trouble, I really want to end this. So this would also apply to games with microtransactions. Except we didn't say microtransactions since these were in plain English. So this would cover free-to-play games. Because if you've been sold something like a virtual horse, but then the publisher destroys the game, well, now you can't access your horse.
Oh, no.
I've been told undisturbed possession is a term for what I'm talking about here. And finally, these rules cannot be superseded by end-user license agreements.
See, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. There are some things that you can cede to a company with license agreements, and some things that you can't. Like, for example, like, this is not with an EULA, but like just here in the US, you cannot enter into a contract of slavery. Even if both parties are adults, you cannot sign a contract that says I'm a slave.
That's how companies have been getting away with highway robbery in the first place.
We had a big war over it.
Especially in the US.
It was a big thing.
There's no point in having rights if you have to sign them away just to play a game. I'm sure a few of you right now are scoffing at this proposal, but just remember Internet Explorer, guys. It was impossible.
It's complicated, yeah.
And that's it, pretty much. Now, one thing we left off the table, but it's kind of an open secret we'd be willing to compromise on, or at least I would be if a company doesn't fix the game, but they give you all the information, tools, software, and so on so that a programmer could be reasonably expected to get it working again, yeah, that's an acceptable substitute. Though the resentment some others had helping on this was strong, and they didn't trust companies not to abuse a provision like that. And they could be right, so we left it out of the proposals.
Okay.
We also left out this applying to all software and restricted it just to video games. Now, don't get me wrong. I personally think all commercial software should have these provisions also. But this is already such an uphill...
It's smart for him to say that and to do that because it just increases the scope so much larger that it would be almost impossible to approach.
battle, that expanding the scope
Yeah.
would invite many more enemies and weaken our odds. Remember,
Source code release seems unreasonable. I kind of agree with that. I'm not sure if I agree with the idea that they have to provide everything to a person to fix the game. I'm not sure that they need to provide that. I don't know.
I am single issue. The point is, even if you don't own the crew, you'll still be able to do something if you live in one of the countries where these petitions were launched.
Right.
This is a multi-pronged attack. I have prongs for everyone. Well, no, but a lot of people. It's complicated. Remember a while back when there were so many versions of Watch Dogs for sale that somebody made a spreadsheet on how to buy the game?
Standard edition, special edition, vigilante edition, Uplay exclusive edition, limited edition, DedSec edition, digital deluxe edition, Uplay deluxe edition, gold, season pass.
It's not that bad, but it does have a lot of variables. What I've found
And
is
that's
that
nothing compared to Skyrim.
what people can do varies on where they live and whether they own the crew or not. But even then, it can still be confusing. So I've seen it as a priority to make this as easy as possible for everyone.
Yeah.
To that end, I've been working with volunteers to launch a website to do just that. StopKillingGames.com. I hope you can remember that name. It has the 2 G's there back to back. That might throw some
Stop
people
killing
off.
games.
It's
All
a
right.
multilingual website that can easily steer you exactly where you need to go to have maximum impact. Some people can do multiple things. So I even tried to prioritize your options a little bit. In fact, you can even just stop watching and go here if you want. There's nothing
This
else
is really
you
cool.
have to know that's not on the site. We have blazed a trail for you to hit back against the industry. All you have to do is follow it. We've done all the hard parts for you. See, people can complain about the games industry, but the reality is all internet comments are meaningless.
They are.
None of your comments matter.
Nobody cares.
Unless a government official is reading them. That's what this is.
Then you go to jail.
In fact, if you've gotten lost by anything I've said, here's all you need to remember. File complaints if you can, sign petitions if you can, get others to do 1 and 2. And you can do that at StopKillingGames.com. That's it. That's everything. You can tune everything else out like some sort of Zen master if you know those 3 things.
Okay.
But maybe you think I'm exaggerating what we can do. Well, why don't you judge for
Well, people
yourself?
can do anything they want. You get enough people together, you do any kind of stupid shit you want to do. Like, bro, we got a lot of people together, we went to the moon. I mean, you think people can't figure out video games? Like, yeah, you easily can do this.
Since no one else has stepped up on this
Did
issue,
we, though?
I'm assuming command to play general on this attack. So, you want to see my battle plans?
Let's see.
I'll show you my battle plans. This could take a little while.
All right.
Okay, Future Ross here. Some bad news.
Uh-oh.
Like I said, this is an amateur effort. So even though some of these petitions were submitted weeks ago, at the time of this recording, we're still waiting on all of them to open up for signing. So here I am making a hype video to go send everybody to the right place, and they're still not ready yet. They haven't been rejected. We're just waiting on governments.
So they'll be ready in 2027.
This is kind of a nightmare for me.
In December of 2027.
We're moving forward anyway. We do have links to where they're going to show up, though, so that's something. Okay, battle plans. Now, before we get into regions, the first option is worldwide, and it's eligible for literally anyone who owned the crew. Yeah, anyone. Aren't you glad I cleared up those dead ends? Although it does have a critical flaw that can't be avoided. See, the option for all owners of the game is to contact the DGCCRF, France's National Consumer Protection Agency. You go through this website here. They accept
Well, how does France affect the whole world?
Complaints worldwide, but there is a catch. The catch is they want everyone to contact Ubisoft first. So that means everyone is going to have to contact Ubisoft support, tell them to fix the game. Then, when Ubisoft refuses, or 2 weeks have passed, then you can contact France.
Okay.
This is a major setback because gamers are not known for their long attention spans.
Yeah, 2 weeks?
So asking people to wait up to
That's like
2
5
weeks
games.
before taking a second step may ruin us. I may be asking the impossible here. I don't know.
I think the problem really that you're going to run into is that a lot of the people that run government aren't tech savvy enough to understand the nuances of the problem. Because I think that anybody who understands what this problem is will immediately be sympathetic to it and understand how relevant it is. And I also think that people that hear about it will probably agree with the conclusions that he's coming to in this video. Like, for example, I don't have a problem with, like, Nintendo. It's like if they're offering a game and you can buy the game from Nintendo directly, you should have to buy the game from Nintendo directly because it's their product and they're making it. So I'm only talking about this in the context of abandonware, and especially in the context of live service games that are abandoned or go into end of service. I think that if you have a game that goes into end of service and another person or group of people put out a version of that game afterwards, they should be completely allowed to do that, and you should not be allowed to shut them down. It should be their right to do that because you are no longer providing the service that you agreed to indefinitely provide whenever you purchased the game. That is what I think is the cleanest and easiest solution. It's very, very simple. So, like, if you're not providing the game as a publisher, then other people can step in and do it themselves. However, if you are still providing the game, then I think the publisher has every right to remove other people that are doing it without licensing. So it's only in the instance of what is effectively abandonware, which, I mean, to be honest, I think is actually a law right now. Isn't it okay? I'm sure, like, I think Thor, probably from Pirate Software, would know more about this than I do. But, like, my understanding is that there is a law for abandonware that allows you to do this for the purpose of preservation. Am I wrong about that? That's not true? I don't know. Yeah, EA does that, but you can't make money, right? Yeah, I asked Nintendo's lawyers. Okay, yeah, I think they disagree. Anyway, that's what I think. Is that I think that's what needs to happen. And the problem of, like, why it's not happening is simply because, like, even if France does it, there can be companies that probably won't release a game into France. But the markets that you need to really think about are the, very high GDP, very high GDP. Countries like things like China, things like the United States, really big markets that companies can't afford to just not market to. Those are the ones that you need. So France is a really big country, right? Of course it is, but it's not as big as China or the United States. If China made a rule against this or the United States made a rule against this, basically every single video game developer would completely change the way that they play games and the way that they make games. Like, if China made a law against gacha games would disappear because a lot of these games also can only make money whenever, like, for example, if you're selling a game and falsely, probably some of them would still exist, right? But it would dramatically decrease the amount of them, at least. So, like, if you're selling a game and you can sell it to 100,000 people, you can make this much money. But if you can sell it to 1 million people, you have a much higher ceiling. So if you have enough countries that have laws against something like loot boxes, that ceiling is so low that it's no longer a viable business strategy to make a game like that. So as soon as it begins to happen, it continues to happen. So it's only about getting the ball rolling, and then things will start happening. Did China make gacha games illegal? They did not, but there was word and, like, kind of conversation about it happening. And in the process of that, literal billions of dollars were lost in market valuation overnight.
This right here could be exactly why the games industry has been able to get away with this crap for so long. Because no one has the attention span for this second step. Some of you can do it, though. I know it. Some of you. But let's look at the rest of the campaign, because I am not stopping there. God, no. Though remember, everything I'm about to show you can be done in addition.
Yeah, somebody said in chat, I want to let you guys know, like, this is the example of how regulation can be used to be in the benefit of the consumer. Like, this is what regulation is supposed to be for. It's supposed to protect the consumer against companies that are doing things that are unhealthy to the consumer.
To that worldwide step. So there's no one or the other here. And with that, let's start with the outskirts. Australia.
Ooh.
Okay, Australia has a two-pronged attack. First, if you own the crew, you can file complaints to the ACCC, and they may do something. There was news not long ago about the ACCC going after the games industry. For God's sake, we need to find a way to piggyback onto this. Don't go after them and ignore customer games being destroyed. Don't do that to me, Australia. But besides that, Australia is also the first of our government
They'll
petitions.
probably go after them in the context of Grand Theft Auto causing shooters or like causing right-wing extremism. I'm sure they'll solve that problem. Yeah. It'll be fine.
And anyone in Australia can sign these, not just
naturally.
owners of the crew. And honestly, you guys need to hurry up, because once it's approved, we only have a 4-week window. Except, of course, it's not ready yet, even though it's been submitted. They give us a small window, but then don't tell us when it starts. Oh my god. Now, the upside is we only need 50 Australians to sign, but that's nothing. If we show up with 50, they may not take it seriously.
I thought there's only like 30 people in the
I'd rather
country.
we showed up with 50,000. It's like a wise game ad once said, there's no kill like overkill. This is the most time-sensitive element of the entire operation. Go sign it as soon as you can. Future Ross again. I just got word from the Australian government that the petition looks fine, but they can't open it for signing until April 22nd or maybe May 15th. They don't know. So they can't even meet the 4-week deadline they're holding us to. What the hell, Australia?
This guy is beginning to learn the futility. Yeah. Now he's beginning to learn. Oh boy.
Moving on over, next we have Brazil. Now, Brazil is the
Brazil actually has surprisingly a lot of consumer protections regarding loot boxes and pricing in games. I didn't know this, and somebody told me about it, and I researched into it.
wild card in all of this. All the feedback I received said their consumer protection agency would probably be ineffective, but having a class action lawsuit very likely would work. Apparently the argument of we sold you a product but we can take it back at any time doesn't fly with a lot of judges down there. Now at the time of this video, the situation was still in limbo, so this one may or may not happen. If it does happen, however, the cost of a class action lawsuit could be affordable if we have a fundraiser. I was told a 4-figure sum estimate. I currently do not have...
No. USD in Brazil? Yeah, maybe. I don't know what the ratio is there. I
plans for a fundraiser, but if this looks viable,
Yeah, I have no idea.
we may do one later. Don't worry, 90% of the battle
5 for
plans
1?
still work
It's
even
like
if no one
fireworks?
spends a dime.
Okay.
Brazil is just part of the attack on all fronts mentality I've been taking. Moving on up is the United States.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, and moving on is Canada. Now, the thing about Canada is the federal agencies can't do much on this issue.
Oh, man.
So we have to look at the provinces.
Come on, dude.
Okay, the United States.
Oh,
Listen,
all right,
guys,
all right.
I want to keep it real
Here we
with
go.
you. The U.S. is the suicide mission of this
Oh,
operation.
no.
Unlike a lot of other countries, the laws are not gray on this issue. And at this point in time, it's almost hopeless.
Yeah.
Almost. Owners of the crew can still contact the FTC, and I've been given coach points by a lawyer we can tell them to increase our odds to look into this. I am still not expecting a victory here. It's more like I just want to be sure our options are truly dead in the United States before I write it off. I don't want to pronounce the patient dead too quickly. You know how that goes. And hey, don't forget, if you own the crew, you still have that option to contact France directly. In fact, I prefer you do that before you contact the FTC, since it has way better odds. Now, if you're
That's
an
sad.
American and don't
That's
own the
fucking
crew,
sad.
which is probably the majority of my audience, then I have nothing for you. I'm sorry, guys. I really tried.
I don't think this is going to happen until enough people that work in government have the tech literacy to understand the nuances of the problem. Like, for example, like it was interesting to see like Ted Cruz. Remember whenever I talked about the loot boxes and then he talked about it on the show? Like that's whenever more people know that, they will understand how it's problematic. So all we need to do is wait for one senator's grandkid to get his phone and then buy Fortnite V-Bucks on the phone. And then before you know it, Fortnite's going to be against the law. Because I think that these guys just don't understand what the problem is. Call up AOC, she's tech literate. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that somebody like that would probably understand it. There are people that work in the government that do, but also you have to keep in mind that all of the people that work in government need to continue working in government. So they need to be working on issues that prospective voters care about. And the reality is that prospective voters don't really care about these issues a lot either, because tech literacy with a lot of voters is pretty low, because most voters are older and most older people don't play online only games, right? Not the same way that people that are 21 do. So it's a lot of issues that are coming together, right? It's like, imagine like, oh yeah, this senator is going to focus on video games. Okay, well, what do you think somebody who's 61 thinks about that? They probably don't give a fuck.
I just couldn't find anything. Game ownership really is as bad as the naysayers say in the United States. The best I can do is tell you to get the attention of someone else who does qualify to do something. Remember the 3 points. If you're an American and don't own the game, you're number 3. All right, back up to Canada. And ding, ding, ding. Canada has our second petition to government. So if you are a citizen or resident, head on over and sign it. We only need 500 for government to respond. But again, let's try to get a lot more than that, eh? Now, for owners of the crew, we didn't check every last one, but the provincial consumer protection agencies look pretty dire. I cannot endorse going through them at this time. It's almost certainly going to be better if you just sign the petition. Crossing the ocean again, we have the UK. And it's a similar story as Canada. The consumer protection options look hopeless. But hey, we have a government petition. If we get 10,000 signatures, government will respond. And if we get 100,000, then it's considered for debate in Parliament. Now, those sound like big numbers because they are, but we have 6 months to get them. So I think if I keep campaigning, we can do this. And we move inland to the main attack here. First, let's stop by Germany. Germany is one of the few EU countries where their national consumer protection is powerful enough to act on this, despite Ubisoft being a French company.
Okay.
So this is one of the few exceptions where you should contact the local agency first, then contact France, like everyone else. Now, I learned late in the process, Germany and France have the option to petition their governments also. However, their thresholds are kind of high, and I can't hope to cross them without making serious inroads with foreign YouTubers or other media sources first.
Sure.
So if we get enough support and publicity, sure, we can add German and French petitions to the list. But not today. And that brings us to the heart of this, France. This is where our most powerful attacks are. French owners of the crew are the Space Marines of this operation. You have more options than anyone. The more you can do, the better. In fact, most people's best option is probably your weakest. Besides the DGCCRF, we'll also be sending registered mail to Ubisoft as part of summoning a government mediator to take legal action on the customer's behalf. It's almost like having your own prosecutor. Amazing. And just to hit every last stop, French citizens will be contacting the UFC Que Choisir, a powerful consumer advocacy group with a great record of defending gamer rights. And we actually juiced the whole process in France a little earlier prior to April, but that was the special operations phase of things. That part's over now, so don't worry about it. And for the rest of the European Union, this is where most of our dead ends were.
I also think that this problem will get worse over time. And this problem, it will reach an entropy that people will begin to care about it. Because right now, there's still a lot of games that you can play offline. But I think that we clearly see where the trend is, right? We clearly see where things are going. So I don't think that it's hit a tipping point yet to where people care about it that are to where consumer competency understands what the problem is and is able to have a conversation about it. In the same way that now, consumer competency understands PCs, relatively well, especially compared to, the 90s. But they don't understand crypto, and that's why there's less regulations on crypto than there are on just computers.
Since first I thought people should contact their consumer protection agencies. By and large, no. They tend to only look at national businesses, and Ubisoft is in France. So then the documentation says to contact the European Consumer Center.
Okay.
And no, I don't advise that either. We did do that for a while, but the answers were all over the place. Some said Ubisoft could do whatever they wanted because of the license agreement. Others said Ubisoft was liable to provide the service forever, which is kind of insane.
Yeah,
that's
too
going
much.
farther than even I want.
Yeah.
But most of them had no idea how to handle this. One clerk said they had never heard of someone make this kind of complaint before. Another one of them said it is unclear if these actions from the company are legally permitted. There is no clear legal regulation for this.
That also means that there's not a regulation against it either. I think that he's just saying, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Somebody asked, what do you think about capitalism and gaming companies? I think capitalism is one of the best things that we've ever had. I am a massive supporter of capitalism. I'm a huge supporter of capitalism. There are instances where capitalism goes too far. But instances where it goes too far does not mean that its general effect is not positive.
So that's from the European Union itself, guys. There's no consistency. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. There's apparently no laws on this. What year is this?
Yeah.
I mean, we're still getting robbed. It's amazing game companies have been able to
be fair, this actually isn't that new, that old of a problem. Like, this problem has only really started emerging in like the last 10 years. It's not like this has been going on for 30 years or 50 years. Like, this is a pretty new issue.
Go on for so long, existing between the cracks in the law like this, like cockroaches. We need to shine light on it.
Yeah.
And on that note, the final lane of attack is the Moonshot, which is the European Citizens Initiative.
Okay.
It's like the other petitions, but way bigger.
So the World
this
Economic
one is
Forum?
ambitious. It might actually be delusional for me to attempt this. I don't know yet. But we would need 1 million signatures across the entire European Union for this one. And there are some caveats, so in reality, more than 1 million. However, we will have 1 year to get these.
That's a long time.
I sure as hell can't get this from my audience alone, but that's a lot of time. If I campaign hard enough, maybe we can get those. And if that wasn't enough, this is also the weakest part of the campaign. Because while we're ready to go, it takes months for the EU to approve your proposal before signing. So that means there's going to be months delay between now and when this goes public. That is the kiss of death. That means we'll lose most of the momentum from April, and I'll have to come out and campaign for this again months from now.
This is one of the big problems that like internet campaigns have, is that most people don't actually care about anything, and they only get mad recreationally, and they don't really care about the issues they're getting mad about. I don't know even if this would be possible.
This one may be a bridge too far. I don't know.
Yeah, because it just takes too long.
But again, this is me attacking on all fronts. And that's the campaign. We have up to 11 fronts of attack, with maybe 13, though in reality, 3 of these are pretty iffy. But the rest are relatively solid. This is happening, guys. This strategy is my absolute best effort as an amateur. Now, I'm biased when I say this, but if you care about not losing...
I think that the main thing that you need to do in order to get people to be on your side for this and to make action is to communicate the problem in a way that's easy for a person who doesn't fully understand it to understand it. Like, you can't make a 30-minute video about it. There needs to be like a 1 to 2 minute video about this that fully explains what the problem is and why it's a problem and how it's a problem. Yeah, basically a TikTok. And I'm not criticizing, because like you have to make a video like this to explain it, but I think that the main issue is just consumer awareness. Because I've read my chat for like the majority of this video, or the whole video, and a lot of people in chat are misunderstanding what's going on here.
Your games in the future,
this
is the best chance you're ever going to get to do something about it. As far as I know, no one has ever challenged the legality of game destruction, and certainly no one's attempted it on this scale. And I can't say by how much, but this is going to get bigger too. In fact, the next phase after this is to essentially spam myself on the internet to try to get more attention on this. I'll do interviews, appearances, just try to get people to make Twitter posts, whatever. I don't really want to do that, but if that's what it takes to end this, I'll do it.
Sure.
I have a giant list of people I plan to contact, though you don't have to wait. If you have an audience and want me to talk about this, you can save me the trouble and contact me directly. Or you can skip me entirely. I don't have to be involved in this.
Somebody actually brought up a really good point in chat, and I wonder if there's a parallel for this that you could use in the US. So they said that automobiles, there's laws like this in the automotive industry that ensures that components are produced for an X amount of years indefinitely, even after production is ended. If you know anything about this, do you know that whenever that time ends, are other people allowed to produce that same component afterwards if the manufacturer Is it making it? Sounds like a parallel precedent. Yeah, I think this is actually a very, very good precedent right here. Yes, well then there you go. That's the precedent right there.
Send people to stopkillinggames.com. It'll take care of the rest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke. I even have to do any of this for us to try not to get robbed. But that's gaming for you. One thing to keep in mind is the trajectory for gaming is so bad. We have absolutely...
It is. This problem will get worse every single year as companies claw back more consumer rights and you lose more autonomy and more control over the things that you buy. It's a big problem that nobody seems to understand or care about.
Nothing to lose. I mean, how does gaming get worse than publishers destroying your games?
Let's find out.
We've already had a glimpse of the future, too. It's history now, but when Microsoft unveiled the original Xbox One, their plans showed us what game companies have in store for it.
This was huge, by the way. This was awful.
A surveillance device necessary to use the system that collects biometric data off you, you needing to connect to the company.
Oh, by the way, this is like a pretty cool thing, but it's not so cool depending on who's using it, is that you can actually measure how big a room is, what's in a room, and how many people are in a room just simply by having access to a microphone, because you can measure wavelength signals.
Every 24 hours, or else you're locked out of your system. And when they eventually end support, your entire game collection becomes unplayable. Welcome to the future. Now, soon afterwards, they realized they came in too hot and had to walk some of that back. But the industry has been taking...
That's not what happened. What happened was that PlayStation 4 came out, and PlayStation 4 marketed itself as not doing any of these things, and they were destroying Xbox in the market so badly that Xbox had to pull back everything because they couldn't compete in a free market against Sony that wasn't doing anything like this. So that's actually what happened, is that, and this is the good thing with competition, free market capitalism, is that people can buy something from who they want. So whenever you have one company like Microsoft that's doing something that's extremely consumer unfriendly, you can have Sony that holds them accountable indirectly in the free market.
The boiling frog approach since. This is where we're already headed if we don't do anything on this. Now, I can't say if this campaign will be successful or not. But what I can say is if people put in the minimum effort, then we are going to get answers on this and close the book on this one way or the other. Again, if we pass the petitions, governments have to respond and own that answer. If consumer agencies get enough complaints, they probably will too.
Yeah.
We won't have any more of this no clear regulation crap. I can almost promise you that much. Plus, if we win, can you imagine how good it will feel in the future knowing all your games are safe and you only have to think about whether you like the game or not? That's my vision of gaming for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd love to see that.
It's a little different from the industries.
Yeah.
And if we lose, we'll at least get told straight to our faces that in a democracy, you can never own video games that you paid for, no matter how many people want that to happen. I guess this will be a civics lesson then. Finally, I'd like to end this by saying thank you to Ubisoft. You're a French company and you pulled this crap. And you did it to one of your flagship titles with millions of players. If this had been Electronic Arts or Blizzard Activision, I wouldn't have had nearly the options that I do.
That's
and
why
a
Blizzard
month
does
later,
it.
you made a PR statement of saying people should get comfortable not owning their games. And then go on to lie in that same interview about online games being safe. As
you don't lose what you built in the game or your engagement with the game. I remember reading this article, and what the person said in the article was kind of taken out of context, but given the way that people are on edge with losing ownership, people were angry about it. But in the article, he was saying, why are gamers okay with, or not okay with, not owning their games, but people that use streaming services are. That's what he was talking about in the context.
You're killing the crew. I mean, what are you going to do next? Threaten the judge?
It was like 8 months ago or something.
Here I've been thinking I have no way to fight this, and you go and create one of the best openings ever for me.
Yeah.
Shame on me if I don't act on that. I mean, it's not perfect, but this is a solid 8.5, 9 out of 10 opportunity here. If we can't win on this, we'll never win. There's no doubt in my mind. You set yourself up for us, so we'll swing as hard as we can and see what happens. All right, that's it. Go to StopKillingGames.com.
Good for him, man. Hey, good for him. I'll link you guys the video. Yeah, give him a sub. Yeah, there's the video. I went there and I did it.
Don't forget about the European Citizens Initiative. It's coming in a few months.
Oh, I'm sure that's going to happen. Good video. Yeah. Good cause, but the video's too long and bad at grabbing attention from people. I felt bored watching it. I understand that, and that's why I think that... So the big problem really with this is, like, he's not talking about all games and all games that are available. Because 80%, like this 87% of missing disappearance of classic games, just because the publisher isn't providing them anymore, that doesn't necessarily mean that the publisher should. Like, there's many Super Nintendo titles, for example, Nintendo does not provide anymore. However, the real problem and where this really becomes an issue is games that require online functionality. And whenever the company decides that online functionality is no longer financially beneficial, then the company removes the functionality and you can't do anything. That's where the real problem is. That's what the issue is. That's the problem. And I think that really the solution to it is if the company is not providing a workable, like, playable version of the game that people can use, then other people privately who own the game should be able to do that themselves. Now, if the company is providing that, then I don't think that other people should be allowed to. However, if the company goes end of service and they're no longer providing the game, if somebody else wants to do it, they should have every right to do it. Because you did buy the game, and I think that you do own something and you do have the rights to something. I don't like the fact that these companies can effectively revoke your entire access to the game. I think that they should only be able to revoke your access to their online services. At least nobody should have any rights. Yeah, there it is. And have you ever tried Albion, planned obsolescence? Well, yeah, these games are planned obsolescence. I'll link you guys the video again. You going to interview the guy? Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to talk to him about it and see what he thinks. But yeah, I totally support this. I think this is true. The biggest hurdle that you're going to have to overcome is actually just simply getting people to understand the issue. Because I think that most people don't really understand what this problem is. They don't see it in, like, the long-term perspective. But, like, if Candy Crush ever, went end of service, you'd see voters changing this instantly. Because that's what a lot of the, older people play, is like these bullshit phone games. So as soon as the bullshit phone games start going end of service, then you'll see laws against it. But the problem is that a lot of people don't understand it in the context of, like, they don't know what Wild Star is. They don't know what Club Penguin is. So how could they possibly get it? I don't know what Habbo Hotel is. Do you think regulation to make it to where companies need to guarantee a minimum years of functionality or issue full refunds? No, I don't think that a company should need to guarantee a minimum type of, a minimum time of, what do you call it? Maybe like 30 days. I don't know. I think 2 years is way too long. Maybe 30 days or something very small. But no, I think that really you should just make sure that people have the autonomy to do it on their own. 90 days, something like that? Yeah. What about something nostalgious compared to Retail WoW? They fundamentally changed the game and someone wants to host the original server? Well, fundamentally, Retail WoW is not Classic WoW. Because if you're playing World of Warcraft Dragonflight, that's not the same thing as playing World of Warcraft. It's the same thing as Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is not the same as Mad Max Fury Road. They're both Mad Max, but one of them is completely different than the other. How should WoW solve the issue to play the game whenever they ban you? Well, I mean, if they ban you and you get banned for, like, doing something that's against their terms of service, then that's too bad. That's what you get. I'm talking about the publisher. I'm not talking about the publisher refusing service. I'm talking about the publisher not providing service, which is two very different things. Like, I think that they should absolutely be able to kick you out. 100%. Like, imagine, like, oh, they have to have you in there? Like, that's insane. Of course not. But they should also, like, have to provide a service to people that bought the game, or at least to give those people the autonomy to provide the service for themselves.